Good evening. I'm Jake Ward in for Joshua Johnson. It's good to be with you on this Tuesday, July 12th. And here is some of what we're talking about tonight. Among the many revelations from today's January 6th hearing is that top Trump officials say they refused his demand to seize voting machines.
Have the federal government seize voting machines? That's a terrible idea for the country.
We'll also examine what the committee calls, quote, an unhinged meeting that led up to it. A California doctor wants to set up floating abortion clinics in federal waters, out of reach of state laws. She'll join us to talk about it. Tonight's feature report will examine the wide range of challenges facing transgender men when they get their periods. And the largest telescope ever built captures images more than 13 billion light years away, and they are absolutely breathtaking. On the night of December 18th, 2020, the Oval Office was unhinged. That's the word used by people who witnessed it that day. It was filled with people threatening each other, screaming profanities, with some almost getting into a physical fight, all because former President Trump did not want to accept that he had lost the 2020 election.
Oh, yeah. It was not a casual meeting. At times, there were people shouting at each other, hurling insults at each other. It wasn't just sort of people sitting around on a couch, like chit-chatting.
Flynn screamed at me that I was a quitter and everything, kept on standing up and turning around and screaming at me.
We landed where we started the meeting, at least from a structural standpoint, which was Sidney Powell was fighting, Mike Flynn was fighting. They were looking for avenues that would result in President Trump remaining President Trump for a second term.
And here's more evidence that figured prominently in today's hearing. A tweet sent by Trump on the day after that, quote, unhinged meeting, in which he wrote on December 19th, 2020, quote, big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there, will be wild. Committee member Representative Jamie Raskin pointed out how right-wing extremist groups were galvanized by those words.
One user asked, is the 6th D-Day? Is that why Trump wants everyone there? Another asserted, Trump just told us all to come armed. A, this is happening. A third took it even further. It will be wild means we need volunteers for the firing squad.
We also heard from former White House counsel Pat Cipollone as part of a videotaped interview from his testimony behind closed doors last week. Cipollone was present during several key meetings related to Trump's attempt to stay in power and overturn the 2020 election, including a gobsmacking moment when Trump wanted to seize voting machines.
But if your question is that I believe we should concede the election at a point in time, yes, I did. To have the federal government seize voting machines, it's a terrible idea for the country. That's not how we do things in the United States.
The committee also heard from two witnesses who testified about the influence Trump had over the crowd that day. One man, Stephen Ayers, who joined the riot and recently pled guilty to illegally entering the Capitol. The other, Jason Van Tatenhove, the former Oath Keepers spokesman, who talked about a, quote, armed revolution that day. But perhaps the biggest revelation came from committee member Representative Liz Cheney when, during the closing moments of the hearing, she linked Trump to witness tampering.
After our last hearing, President Trump tried to call a witness in our investigation, a witness you have not yet seen in these hearings. That person declined to answer or respond to President Trump's call and instead alerted their lawyer to the call. Their lawyer alerted us, and this committee has supplied that information to the Department of Justice.
NBC News reporter Julie Sirkin joins us now. Julie, thank you so much for being here with us. Let's start with that cliffhanger. That is the one that gets my attention. What do we think Liz Cheney means by this? This is really a big cliffhanger she's throwing out there. What do you think she means by it?
Yeah, you're not alone, Jake. I was in the room when she made those closing remarks, and everyone's ears sort of perked up at that moment. Not that they weren't paying intense attention the entire time, but it was the second hearing in a row that Vice Chair Liz Cheney made that kind of cliffhanger where she alluded that former President Trump or his allies may have tried to pressure witnesses, may have gone so far as witness tampering those exact people that the committee was in talks with. Now, Benny Thompson, the chairman of the committee tonight, told reporters that he does know who Liz Cheney was talking about. He didn't reveal whether this person would be present at a future hearing, namely the one that's happening next Thursday. And he said, look, this is something the Justice Department is now looking into, so we'll have to see how the cards land.
So it sounds as if we just don't know at this point whether that witness is going to show up there. But your sense is that next Thursday we may not hear from that person.
Yeah, Benny Thompson alluded to the fact that this is something they're going to have the Justice Department look at. Look, they may play a portion of their closed testimony, but it doesn't sound like for sure that this person is going to be at next week's hearing.
And Julie, what about Pat Cipollone, right? That testimony was also something lawmakers seem to want to hear a lot more from. Do we think we can hear more from him in future?
Look, Jamie Raskin, other members of the panel leading up to today's hearing kept teasing the bombshells that they heard from Pat Cipollone, how he corroborated other witnesses, including Cassidy Hutchinson. He was really that person that they've tried to talk to for months. Remember, they spoke to him briefly in April. They went so far as to subpoena him for his testimony, and he sat down with them for 8 hours on Friday. They only played portions of his testimony today. Other members of the panel, committee aides, alluding to the fact that in the next hearing, which may not be the last, by the way, they might show more and more of his testimony because he was crucial not only in that December 18th meeting, but remember, next week's testimony could focus on those 187 minutes, that critical piece of time between when the rioters stormed the Capitol and when President Trump finally called them off.
Well, we're obviously looking forward to seeing this next hearing. We're expecting to see it in prime time on Thursday. There are so many things that were teased today about what might show up in it and in future. What are you hoping or expecting to see next Thursday in prime time?
Yeah, look, we don't know who the witness is going to be yet at that hearing, but because it's in prime time, as you pointed out, the first hearing started in prime time. This one is now in prime time. It could be the last hearing, but Benny Thompson did not close the door tonight. At future hearings, even after they potentially write their public report, we know it will zero in on that period of time that President Trump didn't issue a message to his supporters, didn't tell them to go home and leave the Capitol, because what they've done so far and what they were able to lay out so methodically through the last 7 hearings is exactly how much influence former President Trump had, both in pressuring his allies, the Department of Justice, his vice president, election officials, and today linking pretty clearly and effectively just how much influence he had in the rioters themselves. Stephen Ayers, someone we heard from today, said he left when President Trump told him to leave. And I think that was very telling, and it was a very pivotal moment just being in the room. You could see people really paid attention to that connection they were making.
And Julie, I guess I'm wondering, for those of us who have not been in that room, what is that like? It's all very formal. It all seems very composed, but I can't help but imagine that there's a lot of tension in that room. What does it just feel like to be there? Tell me about that.
Yeah, my head was on a swivel, especially today, because the officers who were there, Officers Spinone, Dunn, Ganell, Hodges, they've been in the room every hearing. Those are the people I've personally been paying the closest attention to, especially today when they were sitting just feet away from a rioter who was in the Capitol on that day. There was just a tremendous amount of emotion and tension in the room, perhaps more than people can even imagine when they're watching on their television screens. Every little reaction, every little movement is something that we notice when we sit in the center of the room as reporters. And so just every hearing felt like one was building on top of the other. And today certainly hit that mark as well.
A long period of drama here. NBC News reporter Julie Sirkin, thank you so much for being here. And we're joined now by NBC senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen. Thank you so much for being here. And, you know, we spoke last night, and I wanted to hear your impressions then. I really want to hear your impressions after today's hearing. What stuck out to you?
Well, this was the most difficult assignment for the January 6th committee because they are trying to make the link between Donald Trump's actions and the riot at the Capitol. And those, at least from what we saw today, are not direct links. There's not a missive from Donald Trump telling his supporters that they should storm the Capitol. What there is, however, is a lot of evidence that they took inspiration from what he said, that people around him had good reason to know that that's what was going on. There was indication of connections between Michael Flynn and Roger Stone, two longtime advisors to Trump, and these extremist groups, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. And the president himself, former president himself, as was reported in this hearing, newly, was somebody who was revising his remarks, revising his tweets, often tweaking them to escalate, particularly with regard to former Vice President Mike Pence, who, as you know, became endangered by the rioting at the Capitol. Rioters got within 40 feet of him, and some of them chanted, "Hang Mike Pence."
You know, it is amazing. You know, typically I cover technology, social media, its effect on human behavior, and a lot of the time the result is really what you're looking at, and intent has less to do with it. Here we're talking about a very different world in which this committee is trying to lay out sort of intent and effect. But for me, when I see those quotes and how people took the president's words, the connection looks very clear to me, but I'm realizing I may not be looking at it in the same rational way that you probably do, having looked at the committee's testimony all this time. How well do you think those two things are connected at this point?
I mean, the idea that Donald Trump didn't know that he had significant influence on his supporters is absurd. This is a man who once bragged about how he could walk down Fifth Avenue shooting people and not lose support. We know from previous testimony from Cassidy Hutchinson that he knew people were armed in the crowd, and he told them to the march to the Capitol anyway. You know, this is a president who I think the committee today made a good case of arguing was neglectful at the very least. And I think what we're going to see in the next hearing is their effort to show more, not only that he was neglectful of the possibility of violence, but that when there was violence actually occurring, when he could see the effects of his work, he did nothing to stop it. And they're going to make the argument not only that that was illegal, but also complete dereliction of his duty, his oath under the Constitution to provide for the defense of the United States of America.
And now the committee laid out a very stark picture of a meeting that took place on December 18th, and Representative Jamie Raskin says the meeting has been called the, quote, craziest meeting of the Trump presidency. I mean, and we've heard about some pretty crazy meetings so far. So I guess I'm wondering, how dramatic was that meeting, and how directly is the committee trying to connect it to the events of January 6th?
I mean, you nailed it right on the head there. I mean, like, how do you make the judgment that one meeting was the craziest of all the crazy meetings in the Trump administration? And yet, this one stands out. You know, the way the story unfolds is that Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel, gets called in to the Oval Office. He's told by colleagues that he better get in there. And he walks in and he sees Mike Flynn, the former national security advisor, who was, you know, pardoned for his lying to the FBI. He sees Sidney Powell, an election attorney for Trump on the outside, who was spinning these crazy theories about fraudulent voting machines, and he sees these folks in the room, and of course the former Overstock.com CEO Patrick Byrne sees these folks in the Oval Office talking to the president about how he should use emergency powers to seize voting machines from the states. And Cipollone's reaction is these are his words, that he thought the proposal was nuts. Not only did he think he was nuts, he said that to Trump, and there was an argument, a fierce, profane argument. At one time, Eric Hirschman, one of the White House lawyers, looked at Flynn, the retired general, and said, you know, either come at me or sit your butt down. I cleaned that up a little bit for the viewers at home. And ultimately, the sprawling out meeting ends up in the residence at the White House.
It's really extraordinary to hear everything you've laying out and how you can imagine that, conceivably. I mean, this is the thing we're waiting to find out, whether this will then play into a case that the DOJ may bring. I also want to just talk for a second about the political effect in the little time we have left here. Let's look at some poll numbers together from the latest New York Times Siena College poll. I have them here. The 75% of primary voters said that Mr. Trump was, quote, just exercising his right to contest the election. And 19% said that he threatened American democracy. And among Republican voters, 49% of them said they'd support him for a third nomination, and a combined 47% would support someone else. And so after all you've seen and all of this, does it surprise you, does it seem to you that any of this is making a dent in Donald Trump's political prospects?
I do think it's making a dent. Donald Trump lost the last presidential election. We look at those numbers with Republicans, and it was played today in some of the news media reporting that 49% suggests he's in a weaker spot than he used to be. But I would just note that in an open presidential primary, somebody with 49% in a system where the winner takes all the delegates in a lot of the states, you would cruise to renomination, or you cruise to nomination with that number. The problem Trump has is that if 20% of the Republican Party is unwilling to vote for him under any circumstances, or whatever that percentage was, 19%, say that he wasn't just exercising his rights to contest the election, then he's in bad shape in a general election.
Yeah. NBC's senior national politics reporter, Jonathan Allen. Jonathan, thank you so much for making time tonight.
Thank you.
Still to come, the second installment of the Now Tonight series on periods, a trans person's perspective on menstruation. Plus, we'll help you understand the political revolution in Sri Lanka and how the country is facing its worst crisis in over 70 years. We're glad you're with us for Now Tonight from NBC News. Since the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, Americans who suddenly have no access to abortion care are that much more concerned with contraception. And that makes new over-the-counter birth control pills that much more timely. A French company has asked the FDA to approve the first ever non-prescription birth control pills in the United States. Doing so would eliminate hurdles to family planning services, particularly for low-income women. But the company says the timing of their application has nothing to do with the recent Supreme Court decisions. The pills are already available over the counter in more than 100 countries.
It's not right to hold birth control hostage by a prescription when it is not scientifically necessary, just so that we can get people in to see us.
Now, hormonal birth control is not just used for contraceptive purposes. Some people are prescribed these pills as part of gender-affirming care. A few weeks ago, we brought you the first part of our menstruation mini-series focused on the stigma around periods. Well, today, NBC's Maura Barrett gives us a closer look at another important topic, menstruation in the transgender and non-binary communities.
I think we have a lot of work to do in the broader context to understand that just because you have a uterus and just because that uterus bleeds says nothing about your identity as a person.
Menstruation. It's when a person's uterus sheds its lining, causing menstrual blood and tissue to flow out of the uterus every month. Billions of people experience this across the globe and across the gender spectrum, meaning it's not just women who menstruate. Dr. Jean DeHaan is an OBGYN in Portland that focuses on LGBTQ health and trans care. They are transmasculine, non-binary.
When I was 11, I started bleeding and I thought I was dying. I remember one of my mom's friends was like, "Oh, you're a woman now." And I was so destroyed that I went into our laundry room and I would not come out for the rest of the time that person was there visiting me.
Dr. DeHaan says they, like many others, experienced gender dysphoria. It's the feeling of discomfort or distress that might occur in people whose gender identity differs from their sex assigned at birth.
For some people, it's incredibly dysphoric and it is not acceptable. And for some people, they want to bleed, or some people are attempting pregnancy or, have a relationship with their cycle that they value. So you cannot assume that someone doesn't want to bleed or has dysphoria around their cycle or around their pelvic organs based on their identity, you have to talk to them about it.
Dr. DeHaan says it's not a commonly broached subject, even in the trans and non-binary communities. And that's because everyone's relationship with menstruation is different. We spoke with trans model and activist Kenny Ethan Jones about his individual experience.
And I was 15 when I experienced my first period. And I hated it. It was just, it gives me like weird heebie-jeebie feelings. Periods were the number one thing that made me feel so disconnected from my own body and just fragile in my identity, because, you know, that narrative back then boys didn't have periods. I felt like my body was betraying me. And so spending, you know, your life every month coming knocking a period and having to relive that, you know, it was quite traumatizing, to be honest.
Gender-affirming care, including taking testosterone, changed Kenny's life when he was 16 years old.
I lost Kenny when I started to have my periods, and when I started to dislike my body, I just became a shell of myself. And so I was really stepping into Kenny 2.0. At 16, I was like, I'm Kenny now.
And in most cases, Dr. DeHaan says,
there's no danger in stopping a period if you have an IUD or you're on continuous birth control pills or some other hormonal, testosterone, some other hormonal modification of your body to make you not bleed. That's totally okay.
And while menstruation alone can cause dysphoria, Dr. DeHaan says public bathrooms add another layer of stress. And with new anti-trans bathroom laws in states like Oklahoma and Alabama, trans students are being forced to use bathrooms they aren't comfortable with.
I mean, you add bleeding onto that, it's almost impossible, you know. So I know that people will be forced to make different decisions about where they can go, based on the availability of gender-neutral bathrooms or based on whether or not they're bleeding. Are they bleeding heavily? Are they going to have to access a bathroom regularly? Are they going to need additional products?
Period products are often touted as feminine hygiene products. Kenny told us how distressing it was for him to buy these products as a teenager.
I would travel to shops that were outside of my area because I seen buying period products as outing myself as trans. I hated every moment of it. I felt like I shouldn't be buying this because I didn't feel like I should be using them because inclusive language wasn't used. I felt disconnected from my body. I felt disconnected from my identity.
Not everybody who menstruates is a woman. And so I feel like the dialogue is becoming more inclusive, but the marketing certainly isn't.
Playtech Sport. Play on.
In 2018, Pink Parcel's I'm On campaign sought to challenge the stigma around periods and portray a diverse group of people who menstruate. And after careful consideration, Kenny agreed to be part of the campaign.
A lot of the comments under the article and the campaign was very much from cis women being like, I had never considered this, but oh my God, I can't now unsee it. I had a few trans men message me and basically they were upset with me. Again, for aligning our bodies more with women's bodies. I chose to be a part of that campaign was because it felt freeing. The idea of taking something that I was so ashamed of and caused such a disconnect in my body and made me feel fractured in my identity, owning up to that and being like, I'm going to feel powerful in this situation and I'm going to say that this is just a bodily function that I experience and it doesn't determine my gender. I determine my gender.
And according to Dr. DeHaan, transgender feminine individuals can experience what they call a, quote, cyclical hormonal milieu.
Some people are on testosterone blockers or estrogen or progesterone or a combination of all the above. And so depending on where they are in terms of their delivery of medication or their dosing, they might feel some hormonal fluctuations. And that is what a cycle is hormonal fluctuation.
Dr. DeHaan says understanding the chronic stressors that impede on a transgender person's life is crucial.
We're at higher risk of depression, anxiety, suicide, unstable housing, inadequate access to jobs, all of those things. So when you're thinking about addressing gender-affirming care, you have to be trauma-informed in your approach. You have to understand that daily chronic stress and the buildup of that over somebody's lifetime. It's very significant for a lot of us.
Using inclusive language would have made all of the difference for little Kenny. I would just like trans people to be thought about. You know, I think we've spent so long not being thought about and being, you know, on the back burner of these discussions. But, you know, periods affect us just as much as they do cis women.
We'll get to some of today's other top stories in a moment, including the crypto collapse tanking El Salvador's promised Bitcoin future. Plus, the wildfires threatening some of the country's oldest and most iconic trees, and what we know about the U.S. airstrike that killed a top leader of ISIS. That's right after this. At the time, it was considered a bold leap into the future, but El Salvador may be about to become the biggest victim of the crypto craze. In September, that country's government announced it would accept Bitcoin as legal tender. Back then, the price of the world's most popular cryptocurrency was rising steadily, peaking in November at almost $70,000 per. But that was then, and this is now. Bitcoin has fallen straight off a cliff. It's now trading at less than $20,000, and its value is not the only thing that's collapsed. So, too, has the support for Bitcoin among Salvadorans. In May, a poll found that just 2 out of 10 Salvadorians support adopting Bitcoin as a national currency. So, how did things go so wrong so quickly? We're joined now by Nelson Raudazabla. He's a Salvadoran journalist who reports on politics and human rights violations for El Faro, and he's also the author of a guest essay in the New York Times entitled El Salvador's Bitcoin Paradise is a Mirage. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's talk first of all about the promise of Bitcoin in your country. Why was it adopted? What was the ostensible purpose of doing so?
So the President Nayib Bukele, who became famous around the world because of this measure, essentially said that it would come with economical benefits to El Salvador, such as very playing on the trickle-down economics, attracting tourism, attracting foreign investments, but also heavily relying on that it would make the remittances, which amount to a fifth or maybe a fourth of the Salvadoran GDP, they would become cheaper for the population in the sense that they would not have fees for the remittances mostly sent from the United States. All of these so-called promises or benefits have failed to deliver upon a year of the law being in effect in El Salvador.
And you wrote in the New York Times, I want to quote from the piece that you wrote. You wrote, Bitcoiners would do well to remember that when they cheer for Mr. Bukele, they're not ushering in the technology of the future. They are enabling a regime that's violating the human rights of its citizens. Tell me about that. What did you mean when you wrote that?
What I mean is that this is basically the whole Bitcoin stunt is a PR movement. And what it means is it's used, and it's been heavily used by President Bukele to divert attention from other of his authoritarian movements. He changed the constitution, he changed the constitutional magistrate, the constitutional court, and then those constitutional justices that he elected said that he can re-elect, when Salvadoran constitution says 6 times in different articles that consecutive re-election is not allowed. He has constantly used Bitcoin to divert attention from other scandals from corruption or from his own government's dealings with dangerous gangs like MS-13, which you might be familiar with in the U.S. So the government had a pact with the MS-13 that collapsed and caused the lives of 87 Salvadorans in a weekend. And the president has constantly gone to Bitcoin to divert attention and to gain and to harvest headlines all over the world, saying how bold he is, how audacious he is, how innovative this is. But it's a diversion. And my argument is that this is so allegedly going to bring financial freedom to Salvadorans, but we do not have political freedom. We're losing our freedom of expression. We're losing our or the freedom of democracy, the right to go to the elections and change the president and to follow rule of law and all of these different things. And Bitcoiners only see that it's good for their product and it's good for their currency or so-called currency or for their speculative asset, and they are cheating on him for that. And I think that is antithetical to the ethos of Bitcoin, which talks about freedom and which talks about all of these kind of different things.
Nelson Rauda Zambla, reporter for El Faro. Gracias por su tiempo.
Thank you very much.
Meanwhile, in California, a wildfire continues to rage in Yosemite National Park. By this morning, it had grown to more than 3,200 acres. Firefighters say that they have contained around 20% of it. But the fire is inching closer to a grove of ancient sequoia trees. It's a place millions of Americans, including my family, regularly visit. One of the best known is 3,000 years old. Earlier this week, NBC's Cal Perry caught up with Yosemite Superintendent Cicely Muldoon. She explained just how special these trees are.
Why is it important to preserve the trees?
They're among the oldest living things on Earth. They are iconic for the national park system. They're in a very limited range here in the Sierra, so you only find them right here on the planet, and they're really threatened by climate change and wildfire. In the last 2 or 3 years, we've lost about 20% of the whole population of giant sequoias, so you can bet we're doing everything we can to protect them.
The U.S. military today killed the leader of the terror group ISIS in Syria in an airstrike. U.S. Central Command announced that it had eliminated Maher al-Agal, who they say was working to expand ISIS networks outside Iraq and Syria. Another senior-ranking member of the terror cell was seriously injured in the strike. President Biden issued a statement on the successful mission saying that the strike, quote, demonstrates that the United States does not require thousands of troops in combat missions to identify and eliminate threats to our country. This is the latest in a string of recent American operations against ISIS. An ISIS leader and bomb maker was captured in a raid last month, and a February airstrike killed the previous leader of ISIS. This will likely be the year the population of our planet reaches 8 billion people. That's according to a new report from the United Nations, which predicts we'll hit that mark in mid-November. Think about it this way. In 1975, there were just 4 billion of us here. That means it will have taken just under 50 years for our population to double. The report also predicts that the next few decades of growth will be concentrated in just a few countries. Among them, Congo, Egypt, Ethiopia, India, Nigeria, Pakistan, Tanzania, and the Philippines. It also predicts that India, already the world's largest democracy, will eclipse China as the world's most populous country sometime next year. China and India together account for nearly 3 billion people. Tensions in Sri Lanka boiled over this week. Tens of thousands of protesters stormed the government buildings after months of economic crisis, the country's worst in more than 70 years. Sri Lanka's President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe both say they will now resign, making the way for a new government which will be tasked with restoring the economy. So why has public anger risen so sharply? What is behind this economic crisis, and what happens next? Well, Sky News correspondent Nicole Johnston has more.
This may be the only food these children have today. Everyone is here for a free meal from charity. With poverty soaring, 1 in 5 Sri Lankans are going hungry. And families stuck living in utter misery have no way out of it. Indika is trying to provide for 2 disabled children and a grandmother with diabetes. Before the crisis, Indika worked as a labourer, she told me. Now there's no work or money for either food or medicine. And for her dinner, only a cup of tea. With no money for a bus, the only way to get home is on foot, a 3-mile walk. Even the volunteers have gone without food for the last few days. The UN estimates 70% of people are missing a meal every day.
The last 3 months, none of the politicians in the fuel queues, none of the officers in the fuel queues. So how come they are not there and we are in the queue? Some of my friends are there for 4 days.
Who do you blame for this?
The Sri Lankan government, the president is definitely, responsible for the crisis that we are in.
Drivers agree with that. 6 weeks ago, they spent a few hours a day in petrol queues. Now they wait for days. Without fuel, they can't work. Without work, they can't eat.
My life is very bad. Very bad. No money. I have 2 children.
Are the children hungry?
Sometimes 1 time eat, sometimes 2 time eat. Like this, my life.
The Rajapaksa government has racked up more than £40 billion in debt.
These people blame the Rajapaksas for all their problems, and there's now a push to hold them to account. The Supreme Court is set to decide whether it will ban senior members of government, including the former Prime Minister Rajapaksa, from leaving the country.
For years, Sri Lanka has lived beyond its means. Now it's falling apart. In this city of never-ending queues, people are waiting for rescue. Nicole Johnston, Sky News, Colombo.
With us now is Sri Lankan political columnist Asanga Abayagunasekara. He's a senior fellow at the Millennium Project in Washington, D.C., and he's also the author of Conundrum of an Island, Sri Lanka's Geopolitical Challenges. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
I would like to ask, first of all, for your perspective on the food and fuel shortages that we just saw there in our colleague's piece. What is the situation like on the ground for working people in Sri Lanka at the moment?
Well, the people have to stand for more than 4 days to get fuel. They are given a token when they go to the fuel shed, fuel station. So it's a very sad, I would say, a challenging time for the Sri Lankan people. They are having 1 meal a day. United Nations said 22% are hungry in Sri Lanka. Actually, it's more than that. People are hungry. They have community kitchens. So it's a time. What happened on the 9th was an Arab Spring moment. I can compare it to an Arab Spring because the 3 attributes of the Arab Spring, which is against the autocratic rule, corruption, and the economic conditions, match Sri Lankan situation.
And the protests have obviously been going on for months, but it seems now that they have truly reached a boiling point. How has the government been responding to this uprising?
Well, the president has no other option than to resign, so he's due to resign tomorrow. Well, they have occupied the presidential house as well as his office, and also Prime Minister's residence. They want the president to step down as well as the Prime Minister. Well, the president is because of the autocratic rule of the country, as well as the mismanagement, the economic mismanagement, especially from his inward ultra-nationalist policies. And most of the policies, cripple the economy. So this was the sad time for all of the Sri Lankan people, but also a victory for the general public. And I think tomorrow they will be celebrating the resignation. But they want the resignation of the Prime Minister also.
And I wonder, you mentioned mismanagement, and here in the United States, there's enormous emphasis put on the idea that we should move toward a diet of mostly organically grown agriculture. As I understand it, the President Rajapaksa put into place basically an overnight prohibition in your country on anything but organic agriculture. He did away with chemical fertilizers and pesticides, and that seems to have led to an enormous agricultural crisis. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was an overnight shift, and it affected the entire agriculture industry. It's not only that, why I call it, he politicized most of his decisions, saying, using his ultra-nationalist position, that was irrational. Most of the decisions were irrational, such as the assistance, the foreign assistance he rejected from the United States, the Millennium Challenge Corporation Fund, which is $480 million. His own committee rejected, saying it's a national security threat for Sri Lanka. This is incorrect. And also Japanese assistance and Indian assistance. So, what you see is a lot of irrational decisions. And a week ago, he made a very irrational decision, he and his Prime Minister, appointing a casino boss to the cabinet. So those are irrational decisions. And you can see, some of another decision I can share with you. which is, he said, for the people to take one day off from the working week and to grow vegetables. People are hungry. They don't have the basic foods. Now the medicine is running out. So it's a humanitarian crisis in the horizon.
And I have to ask you this because the images seem so parallel. We have so many images here in the United States of the January 6th attack on our capital. Here we're seeing photographs of people streaming into the capital in Sri Lanka. Are there parallels to be drawn between these protests, or when you look at these two things, are they very different?
No, they're different. January 6th was different. I think this is completely different because this is against an autocratic rule. It's against a person who abused the minority community, the human rights violations, which was highlighted in Geneva. So multiple factors of corruption, and now they're trying to fly away to other countries. But the democratic nations should not entertain this, and because of they have looted the money of the people. So the people are asking, we want accountability for the corruption charges. So they want their money back, and that's what you see is the interpretation that it's a mob. It's not a mob. They're children, they're mothers. They're walked in because he's not resigning. This is the 92nd day of the protest. So this was the only thing that they could do, to move into the buildings.
Asanga Abayagunasekara, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Father.
Now, before you go, we have something very powerful to show you, something truly stellar. I got to go to NASA today to see the first photos taken by the James Webb Telescope. Those historic photos and what makes them so historic, next. Now, it does not matter if you're into space science the way I am. I'm sure you have seen or at least heard about the stunning new images just released of galaxies far, far, far away. They are all thanks to the James Webb Telescope, the most powerful instrument ever sent into space. I got to go to NASA today for the big unveiling of those images, and it was a very emotional experience. Have a look.
You are looking deeper into space than any human ever has. New images from the $10 billion James Webb Space Telescope revealed today show stars being born, stars dying, and galaxies dancing so intimately they will soon merge. Last year, as NASA was packing it up for launch, project manager Bill Oakes was still sweating the telescope's details.
We have about 320, 340 single-point failure items.
On this
satellite.
A single thing that could go wrong and ruin it.
But it worked.
James Webb now has its array out.
And today, along with scientists from the 14 partner countries that contributed to the telescope, he is celebrating.
Now it's like...
The telescope is in position right now about 1 million miles away from us, and it's held there by the simultaneous gravity of both the sun and the Earth. Plus, it's capturing images many times larger and more detailed than its predecessor, Hubble. If Hubble established black holes, could Webb establish livable planets elsewhere in the universe?
Yes. I think that's what we will, what you just said, livable planets that potentially could have life as we know it.
And these images are just the first. Until its fuel runs out in about 20 years, Webb will show us incredible things. Starlight, billions of years old, the hidden surface of nearby worlds, distant planets where humans could conceivably walk and even breathe. NASA scientists reveling in this moment.
It isn't hard to explain what we're doing. You just show people. You say, oh yeah, that's what we're doing.
Unimaginable views of the universe delivered to human eyes for the first time.
How do you avoid breaking the law of the land? Well, maybe by avoiding the land altogether. Ahead, the doctor who's trying to get around abortion restrictions by opening a floating clinic. The idea that could mark a literal sea change over reproductive rights, next. In 9 states, abortion is now banned, with no exception for rape or incest. 4 of those states are along the Gulf Coast of Mexico. For women in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, access to legal abortion is moving further and further away. But a newly established nonprofit known as Prowess is hoping to change that. Prowess is an acronym for Protecting Reproductive Rights of Women Endangered by State Statutes. What's their solution? Well, bringing abortion care into the Gulf of Mexico, literally, by establishing a floating clinic on a boat in federal waters. That way, women wouldn't have to travel nearly as far for care and would not be under the jurisdiction of states where abortion is now illegal. Joining us now is the OBGYN spearheading this effort, Dr. Meg Autry. Welcome to the show, Dr. Autry.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it. So let's talk, first of all, about where this idea came from. Was this something that you already had in the works, or did you do this in response to the Roe versus Wade decision?
So, yeah, this is something that I've been thinking about for the last, 3 or 4 years as reproductive rights in our country began to be eroded. And I originally thought of the idea in the Mississippi River because I thought there must be something about those casino boats in the water that makes it different than the land and makes that legal. And after investigating that with the legal team, it didn't seem like that was the best option. And we moved to looking at the Gulf Coast where we could have more impact, as you said, with the restricted states. And there is a swath of federal water in the Gulf that we believe, our legal team believes, that offering reproductive health services in that water is legal.
So talk me through the process here. If you have a pregnant person in Alabama or Mississippi and they cannot get overland to a state where they can get abortion services, how would it work? How would they get to you, and what services could you provide?
Yes, so this is the idea is a comprehensive reproductive health clinic that offers contraception, testing for sexually transmitted infections, treatment for those infections, hopefully vaccinations, as well as surgical terminations. And the vessel, the clinic, would be located in the federal waters, and then the patients would have to get there. And as you said, this is an option for patients, particularly patients who are poor, located in the southern parts of these states where even if they're funded to get to places on land, they can't get there in a reasonable amount of time to meet their needs and take care of their families if they're single parents or sole caregivers. And so this might be the closest and quickest option for them to get the care that they deserve.
So let's talk here about the legal risks you may be taking. In theory, because there is no federal ban on abortion, in federal waters you would be doing something legal. But maritime law, I don't know, it's pretty fuzzy from time to time. I guess I'm wondering, what are the possible legal risks you might be taking here?
You're absolutely right. I mean, I didn't even realize maritime law was a specialty until probably 2 to 3 years ago, and it is very tricky. So we expect legal challenges throughout this entire journey. And like I said, we have a robust legal team, including reproductive rights lawyers from the Lawyering Project, as well as maritime law and defense attorneys. And we believe providers, locations, patients will probably likely all be targeted.
And what does the timeline look like here for your project? How soon could you raise the money that you need? How much do you need? And how soon could you take in patients?
Yeah, so the timeline is really dependent on when we can acquire a vessel. And so once we acquire a vessel, it has to be retrofitted to meet clinic specifications of clinics on land. And so, as I've said before, if someone donated a vessel tomorrow, we could optimistically start that retrofit and be up and running in 6 to 9 months. But I feel like much more realistically is a year time frame. In terms of the vessel, we know the size below which we cannot go, but the upper limit is really dependent on our funding. And we believe, there are one-time costs of acquiring a vessel, a shipyard, retrofitting it, but then there are recurring costs of, for example, crew and medical equipment, security. So we believe we need about $20 million to get this up and going.
Dr. Meg Autry pursuing $20 million for a bold plan to take abortion services offshore. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us this evening. You can send us your thoughts and questions on any of the topics we discussed tonight. Please do. We're at NBC Now Tonight on social media, or leave us a voicemail, 888-575-2NBC, or please email nowtonight@nbcnews.com. Until we meet again, I'm Jake Ward, in for Joshua Johnson. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.